And we did ask you here throughout the show your questions about the government shutdown. I'm sure you have a lot of them. So it's time now to have a live discussion about all of this and what this means. And for that, I do want to bring in Richard Gordon. He's a political analyst joining us live right now to answer your questions. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate it.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
All right. Well, as I said, I had a lot of questions prepared for you, but the viewers really wrote in and they asked some great questions. So we're going to start off with the basics here with some of these viewer questions. So this first one says, what are the reasons for the shutdown and what needs to be done to reopen the government?
Appropriation bills that need to be passed before September 30th or by September 30th to keep the government running. This is done every year. This is the way it always is. It's the way it's always been. Now, they have failed to pass any of the 12 bills. So none of the 12 appropriation bills have been passed. Because of that, there is no money to run the government. It just doesn't exist anymore. Now, just for some history's sake, since 1997, Congress has failed to pass at least one of the appropriations bills. This year, they've failed to pass 12. So what has to happen? So the government is in what's called a partial shutdown, and it will continue that way until Congress agrees to either keep it open temporarily or passes a bill to fund the government and keep it open on a more permanent basis. And to do that, both sides need to agree. Or what frequently happens in these cases is the Republicans have some demands, the Democrats have other demands, and one party blanks. And we've seen that a number of times. So one of those two scenarios, either there'll be a compromise and they'll move forward, or one of the parties will take so much heat over this that they'll realize they can't continue.
All right. So now that we've laid the groundwork here for why this is all happening, let's head over to this next question. How soon can Congress vote again to reopen the government? Does Congress have a schedule, or can they go and vote whenever?
Well, basically, they could go and vote whenever. There's no set schedule. The schedule for the United States Senate, and let's be clear about what happened here, okay? Because I think that's important to understand. The House of Representatives has passed a stopgap measure that will keep the government open for a few weeks. So it's now completely in the Senate's hands. The Senate is controlled by Republicans, as is the House, and Senator Thune, the majority leader, controls the schedule. So if the senator wants to have a vote today at 9, 10, 11, 2, he can do whatever he wants. He can do it today, tomorrow, next week. He can do whatever he wants. Now, if I could talk about it politically for just a second, I think the senator, Republican from South Dakota, Senator Thune, believes that it's in his and his party's best interest to have as many votes as humanly possible. There are two reasons for that. One reason is that his feeling is it shows that the Democrats are unwilling to do their job and pass legislation. And two, three people, two Democrats, one independent, voted with the Republicans to keep the government open on a short-term basis. His feeling is it is possible that he will get the requisite votes in order to keep the government open. So his feeling is more votes are better than none. Let's keep voting.
And before we get back to viewer questions, I just want to go off of that here, because as we've been seeing on social media, really both sides of the aisle blaming each other. Here's a post from Speaker Mike Johnson saying Democrats have officially voted to close the government. He goes on to say, how long will Chuck Schumer let this pain go on? So that's the Republican perspective. If we're able to get a Democratic perspective here, I think we have one. If we can't pull it up, we've been hearing from Democrats as well. Before we brought you on here, Richard, Democrats blaming Republicans as well, and we'll work to get that Democratic response up here in just a matter of moments. But as we look forward to what's going to come in the days and weeks ahead, potentially, what are some of those strategies from both sides of the aisle to really get this done?
Well, let me just talk about the blame game for a second, if I may.
Sure. Yep.
I've been doing this all my life. I worked on the Hill. I worked for a long time ago, a member of the House Appropriations Committee, and I was watching the both sides. And I think my response late last night at like 1 a.m. was, grow up. I mean, the American people do not want to see members of Congress yelling at each other and blaming each other. They want this done, and they want their government to run, and they do not want everyone blaming each other. Sit down and come up with a compromise, and let's move forward. So that's that piece of it. So as far as the strategy goes, they each have their own strategy. The Republican side wants to hold strong to their guns about significantly cutting government. They want to cut Medicaid. They've been very clear about that. The president's been very clear about it. But the real sticking point is that during COVID, there were subsidies that were given for people on Obamacare. There's 24 million people on Obamacare who received financial benefits, financial subsidies to get health insurance through Obamacare during COVID. That is set to sunset, meaning that is about to end on December 31st. The Democrats want to continue it. The Republicans don't want to continue it. And so that's the fight. So in large part, if you want to make this really simple, the Republicans are fighting about sticking up for cutting the budget, making it thinner, not spending as much money. The Democrats are fighting for broader health care for a large segment of the American population. That's in the most simple terms possible.
And Richard, as we return to our viewer questions here, you touched on this a little bit, this question, how long is this projected to last? And I really want to focus on the possible consequences if this last past week. I think a lot of people here wondering this morning how this is going to impact them. Can you speak on that and just maybe even a little bit about what a partial shutdown really means? Because are there some services that are going to remain open?
Well, there are a lot of services that are going to remain open. And to be blunt, for a lot of Americans, they might not even notice. And I think President Trump, in some ways, is hoping that's the case because it really lessens the political impact of this. But let's talk about some of the services that are open. Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, those type of things, Veterans Affairs benefits, those will continue to be open. This shutdown is very different than other shutdowns. This government has not given a list of what's open and what's shut, which is very unusual. They usually tell you, well, these type of things will be closed, these type of things will be open. So, for example, the national parks have traditionally closed in the past. We think they're going to close this time, but we haven't heard specifically. Things like TSA. This is how you and I might feel this the most. TSA, the people who stand at the airport and make sure we're safe, are working. They have to work. They're not getting paid. And what happened last time, the reason it ended last time is because 10 TSA workers, just think about this, 10 TSA workers stopped the government from this shutdown because they refused to come to work. And, after 35 days of not getting paid, they just couldn't take it anymore. And they didn't come to work. And President Trump, who was president the first time, basically caved in and realized that the country was coming to a halt because the airlines couldn't work. Well, they're not getting paid this time either. And, they have mortgages and college payments and bills and all the other things. And we'll see how long it takes. We don't know how long this is going to take. If you look at the history of this going back since Jimmy Carter's time, President Carter, which was the first time this ever happened, to today, some have been a day, some have been a matter of hours. President Trump holds a record. 35 days is the longest it's been. It went from December of 2018 to January of 2019. That was the longest. We don't know how long this one's going to last. This is a tough issue. I mean, they're fighting. Last time they fought over the wall, building the wall on the border. The Democrats said no. Trump said yes. Trump said, I'm not signing anything that doesn't have money for the border. He eventually gave in. The Democrats cannot cave in. Politically, they cannot cave in because they have been so beat up from caving in the past, including just a few months ago, that when Senator Schumer voted to keep the government open, that they politically cannot cave in and cannot give in. And so that's what's going on. We don't know how long this thing is going to last, but it's going to affect a lot of people. I'll tell you the people who are going to get hit the hardest the first, and that's going to be the numerous thousands, hundreds of thousands of federal workers who are sent home, who are not working. Now, they tend to get paid back, and I'm sure your viewers are curious about that. They tend to get paid back after the fact. They will get back pay for not working. But things are going to slow down. I mean, you could get a passport, you could get a visa, but the FDA is not going to be is not doing what they normally do. Health departments are not inspecting things they normally do. Research is not being done. Things are going to slow down, but the effect on the American people from a day-to-day basis is going to come on those issues like people being unemployed. Well, they're being paid eventually, but how do they get food? How do they pay for things? TSA, federal employees, that's the big one.
Right. And as you're touching on that, Richard, we did have this question in here from Juanita saying, how does the shutdown impact the security of our country? Is our country more open to terrorism? Just as you were speaking about TSA there and the impacts with that. Do you want to add any more context to that question?
Well, look, I think that's a really good question. And thank God our men and women in service will continue to work, will continue to get paid. Those type of things will go on. The thing that worries me is the second half of your question on the terrorism part, because, you know, they are going to furlough a lot of people who are involved in investigations and doing things like that. That will slow that process down. Is it an immediate threat? I don't think so. I think your viewer is asking a question about, are we in imminent danger? I don't think that's true. I think there's a longer term danger to the country that we're not even seeing yet, because we don't know what they're investigating and what they're doing. So that will slow down. The other thing I should say is President Trump is taking a very unusual approach here, unusual compared to other presidents, in that he's saying, you know what? I may actually just fire these people, not furlough them, meaning not give them a temporary time off. I may just fire them and never bring them back. And what they have been talking about is, if you're working on a program that the president doesn't approve of, is not in his policies, that he may just fire you and never bring you back again, which will dramatically shrink the government. It will also put hundreds of thousands of people out of work.
All right, Richard. Well, that concludes our viewer questions here, and you've provided a wealth of knowledge on all of this. And so I do thank you for that, because our viewers asked some very good questions there when it comes to what we can expect, how long we can expect this to last. As you're saying, we don't exactly know at this point, and also just how Americans are going to be impacted. Is there anything else that you think we missed that is a big topic here when it comes to all of this that you'd like to share before I let you go?
Well, first of all, I think the questions are great, and they're the questions that Americans are asking. This is unusual. It doesn't happen all that often. And I think people have a right, first of all, people have a right to have their government work. And I think it is really sad that the government can't seem to compromise. And what we used to do is compromise amongst each other. I think we need to put this in the context of what it really is. This is a political game. Okay. This is not about something structural. This is not about a problem in the country. This is a political game, and you have to look at this in the context of the 2026 congressional elections, because that's what this is about. It is about posturing to get yourself in a better position for the next election. The Democrats want the American people to see that they're fighting for their health care, and they're trying to keep healthcare costs down. The Republicans are fighting to show that they're cutting the budget. So that's really what this is about. And unfortunately, because of this partisanship, the American people are going to suffer. And that's the real message. And eventually, why do these things end? Well, they end because the American people have had enough. And they make it known to their members of Congress and to the administration that they're not satisfied with how things are going. That's how it ends. It ends because members of Congress can't take the heat at home anymore. That's what has to happen. And if your viewers want to see it end, that's traditionally what happens.
All right. And of course, we're just going to have to watch all of this unfold here today and in the coming days. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us, as always, on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being on with you.